Summer routines live or die by how easy they are, and honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Groons is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
One of the blessings of this pandemic is that I have a podcast network and I get to talk to my favorite people, even when I can't see them face to face. Yes, I miss games, but at least I'm not missing conversations. And this is one of my favorite conversations every week. This is the Russo Hockey Show. Michael Russo is the star. He writes for The Athletic. I'm Jim Suhan from the Star Tribune. And let's start here, Michael. As every major sport tries to get back into action this summer, if possible, what are the biggest hurdles keeping the NHL from going? What are the biggest hurdles to be leaped over at this point? And are you any more optimistic this week than in previous weeks that something can actually be figured out?
Well, look, I mean, as I've said all along, I mean, there's no doubt that the league and the players are trying, and we're gonna get word here in the next day or so that the league is going to attempt to try to come back. I mean, it looks like a guarantee right now that the players and the NHL are going to come up with some sort of return to play protocol and attempt to have hockey in July or August. They're having an executive board meeting today, the NHLPA, to try to come up with approval process to begin sort of the next step, which would bring everything to phase 2, which would get players back to their cities, have small group activities, and eventually with the goal of opening training camps later next month or early July, and then starting the season up. It's 24 teams that are going to come back. They had a call yesterday with the entire NHLPA. All players were invited on the call. There was a lot of debating back and forth. I know that there were a lot of unhappy players. I don't think it was a contentious call, but I do think that they're unhappy players. I think that there was what I've heard from players today is that they were pretty disenchanted with the lack of detail of what life would be like for players who are going to have to quarantine. Most of the call was about the format, and quite frankly, the format's going to be the format. The players really don't care about that stuff. They care about what their lifestyle is going to be like for days to weeks to potentially months on end, depending on how far you go. And if it's like the MLS, which I was reading the protocol by our Jeff Reuter yesterday, or in today's Athletic, it's I mean, all these leagues, it's pretty invasive on the lifestyles that all these players have. Is that, the MLS, you have to be in your hotel, you can't leave, you have to eat in your rooms, there's no family there, and so the players have a lot of questions that they feel are not being answered or told to them yet. They feel like the cart is before the horse here, that they're trying to come up with, all right, we're coming back with this format, but not telling what life is going to be like. And these players have to quarantine for 2 weeks when they get back to the country. That's first of all. That's like anybody. If you're out of the country, you have to do that. But then, once they go to these cities, they do have to isolate themselves. Right now, they are told they're going to have to leave their families. They don't know if they're going to, what type of insulated bubble they're going to be in. They don't know how often and what the testing process is going to be like. They don't have any idea in terms of, from a safety restriction, what it's going to be like in these rinks. And the other thing is they're not getting paid. Wait till those wolves are out when they really start talking about escrow and all the pain that they're going to deal with in the next couple of years to make up for the damages that this league has faced during this pandemic. So there's a lot of stuff that they're disenchanted about. And look, these guys want to play, but the reality is that it has to be the right situation. And right now, I think the players feel the other thing that they're not happy with, that I talked to the players again, is that it sounds like it's the executive board that's going to make the decision for Donald Fair. It's not at all player vote. And players are really unhappy about that, because there are several players, I guarantee you, that would vote against playing this year.
And the fascinating thing we're seeing going on, and we see it most prominently in baseball because you've had Blake Snell and some prominent players pop off about it, is what owners and leagues are good at doing during contract negotiations, including these, is kind of painting the players as, my God, these guys don't want to play for millions of dollars. And then, and everybody who doesn't make millions of dollars gets to think of them as greedy or selfish. But what the real comparison here within the business of each sport is, you have billionaires who are trying to get players to either play for less or play without any guarantees that they will remain healthy. That's a completely different argument than the old populist, all these rich players just don't want to play thing.
No doubt. And look, I mean, that is the thing that, look, there's no way that player is going to win this PR battle. I mean, hockey fans, the majority of them want to see hockey. Even if there's no fans in the stands, it would be a great diversion for all of us that love the sport to get to watch these guys on the ice again. But these are real challenges that these players are dealing with. And again, you could sit there and say, oh, stop crying, you're a bunch of millionaires and things like that. But look, they have not been told that they have not signed up by becoming professional athletes to essentially have their freedom taken away, where they have to live in a hotel for 2 or 3 months straight, not be able to leave, not see their families and things like that. They're not military men that chose to deploy overseas and things like that. These are professional athletes, because I've seen that comparison by a lot of people. Like, well, yeah, my son's in the Army, he's overseas, he has to leave his family, things like that. Well, they knew what they were getting into when they signed up. These professional athletes that have young kids have not signed up for that. Nobody has been able to also provide answers if there's family emergencies. If you leave this quote unquote bubble and go back into society to go deal with a family emergency, are you then done? Do you have to quarantine for another 2 weeks? Can you, nobody can give answers for that yet. What if your wife is 8 months pregnant? What if you have a newborn at home? Things like that. Like, there's one player I was talking to this morning that's now in the Minnesota Wild that has 2 kids under the age of 2 at home. So, like, this is just the reality of this type of thing. And then to get back to your injury point, is that, say you're in the Stanley Cup final in September and the next season starting in November, and you suffer a quote season-ending injury in the Stanley Cup final, and you're an unrestricted free agent, now you can't suddenly get a job. I mean, that to me is a real concern. Look at Ryan Suter 2 or 3 years ago when he got hurt in Dallas with 5 games to go. Yes, he missed the playoffs, but at least he had 6 months to get ready for the next season. Where now, if that happened to Ryan Suter in the playoffs, you're hurting your team the next full season. And that's not just from a player standpoint; that's from a fan standpoint. Just imagine if Alex Ovechkin or Kevin Fiala got hurt in the middle of the summer, a serious injury, and now all of a sudden, that puts his 2021 season either at risk or delayed. So there's a lot of things here. Now, look, this is not a perfect world. Nobody's going to be happy with everything here. But I guess that was what I heard mostly from the players today, is that they were shocked at the total lack of details being given to them during the last couple of days in terms of what their life will be like in a return to play. A lot of these guys have told me they do not care about the format. Like, the format's going to be the format. There's some people that are going to love it. There's some people that are going to hate it. If you're a Minnesota Wild fan or on the Minnesota Wild, you probably love it, because now you're going to play Vancouver in this 5-game series play-in, and you'll have a chance to make the playoffs, where technically if they came back with 16 teams, the Wild have no chance of making the playoffs. So, that to me is, was something that was told to me by several players today, is that, the format is not what they're concerned about. Playing in front of fans, they get that is just going to be reality. Playing without fans in the building. But it's the stuff that surrounds what their life is going to be like. Nobody wants to be in a hotel for 2 or 3 months straight, except maybe me. I could use the Marriott points.
Yeah, the other thing is, if people want to make the military to player comparison, I don't think it's that we should ask players to take more risks with their health. I think we should treat our military better. But that's a completely different topic.
But I mean, my only point on that is that a lot of people have sat there and said, that have used other comparisons, like, my daughter doesn't complain when he's got to leave his family and go, deploy, or in the case of like, one friend that I know was honestly, has been on a Navy ship for the last year. But that's what they chose.
It's exactly the job. Yeah.
Yeah. Where hockey players are not, never thought that they could, and the other thing that bothers me is the fans out there that sit there and are attacking guys like Devin Dubnyk and Eric Stahl for being honest, and actually saying this stuff on the record. I saw quotes from other guys around the league, Matt Duchene and people like that have said similar things. And, the other thing that bothers me about that is then it forces these guys in the future to not say what they truly feel. Then fans sit there and paint them with I don't even want to read or listen to them anymore because all they give is cliches. It's just such an annoying double standard that bothers me. Like Eric Stahl loves this sport. He loves playing hockey. He shows it every single time he's on the ice. And for him to get attacked by people that have no equity, for all the honest things that he said to us on the Zoom call yesterday is, to me, disgraceful from the fans' perspective. He's got 3 young boys at home. If he's concerned about leaving them, that's absolutely his prerogative. I don't think anybody sitting at home or listening to this podcast or a hockey fan would want to leave their families, behind for something like this.
Or risk their kids' health by bringing a virus back.
Right, exactly. There's many, many different things here to take into consideration. And that's the other thing here is that who's going to be in this bubble? If you're, that's the other thing a couple players have asked me the last week is, all right, you put us in a hotel for 2-3 months. Well, there's still other people that are going to be invading our bubble on an everyday basis. Are they quarantining too? And what they mean are custodial staffs, hotel employees, chefs and wait staff, housekeepers. Are these people living in the bubble, or are they going back home into society and then coming back and maybe bringing them the virus? That to me is a real concern here. Is the NHL going to come up with a way that's essentially going to say, all right, if we put 12 teams in your hotel, well, all your staff has to stay there too for 2 months, 3 months. And then our staff that are not making a lot of money going to be willing to leave their families for that long? Or is this just a bunch of nonsense that we're protecting these players by putting them in this bubble when it's not really a bubble, which gets back to at the beginning of this pandemic when the league was sitting there and keeping reporters out of the locker room, but pulling players into the hallway because, God forbid, reporters bring the virus into the locker room, when the reality is they're bringing players now into a public place to do interviews. It's the same type of thing. It's like the perception that we're trying to protect these guys when the reality is that are they really protected if other people that are used to make the games go on in the hotels, in the arenas, aren't also asked to be isolated?
And you know what? I guarantee no owners are going to put their health at risk for the league. So but let's move on. Hey, tell me about Profile by Sanford, our newest sponsor.
Yeah, Profile by Sanford is my new weight loss journey. I'm really excited about it. It's gone really well. I've done it now for 3 weeks. I'm telling you, it to me is already the best thing that I've ever done. I just feel better. I have personal coaching. It's just one of those things that I've loved every minute of it so far. And it really has not been difficult, which is, a lot of times when I do these weight loss journeys, I feel like 2 or 3 weeks in, I start to lose my discipline. It starts to get really tedious, and I have not felt at all deprived here at all in the last 3 weeks that I've done this. It's developed by doctors to take the guesswork out of weight loss, and that's where the health coaching comes in. Danette's my personal coach. I talked to her. In fact, I'm talking to her right after we get off this podcast, because today is my 3rd week exactly that I've done this. And they're with you every single step of the way. The food is terrific. The plan's terrific. It's been really so far an absolute godsend. So I really highly recommend, especially during a quarantine where a lot of us aren't nearly as active as we used to be. We're sitting around the house watching TV, run through Netflix to the nth degree. I highly recommend you joining Profile by Sanford. There's 6 Twin Cities locations. And for more information, go to profileplan.com and tell them Russo sent you.
If you'd like to advertise with this show or this network and reach a large, committed group of listeners that continues to grow, you can reach me at JSOUHAN talknorth.com, and I'll hook you up with Karen Cleary, our sales expert. Also, listen to talknorth.com. Subscribe. The best way to listen to this show or the network, subscribe to your favorite podcast app, and follow us on Twitter at TalkNorthPod. Thanks to our sponsors, Profile by Sanford, Grey Duck Vodka, Tony Hoagland, your State Farm agent, and Twill in the Edina Galleria.
By the way, one thing I probably should have mentioned about Profile too is that I've been doing all my stuff virtually, obviously during the pandemic, but new member consultations in store by appointment or virtual have started back up. But if you do not want to go to the store, they will do virtual appointments. They'll do free home delivery too, or you can go and pick up your food and all the stuff that they give you once you join Profile, which is a ton of stuff too. Cookbooks, smart scales. All sorts of stuff. You can pick that up at curbside as well.
So The Last Dance, I don't know how many hockey fans watched The Last Dance. It was purely an NBA enterprise, and it wasn't exactly journalistic. It was basically Michael Jordan getting to rip on everybody he wanted and getting to see some great behind the scenes footage that you might not have ever seen before. It was very entertaining. Again, it wasn't journalistic, but it was very entertaining. If hockey was going to do a last dance, in other words, here's this great team taking one last shot at a title, and guess what? Half the people on there hate each other. What would be the most fascinating last dance type hockey show?
I don't know. I mean, it's different in hockey. There are different types of leaders. Like, could you see the Penguins dynasty with Sidney Crosby acting like that?
No, I think that's saying a hockey player who acted like that would get beaten up.
Yeah, I think the most fun, where you wouldn't have like the controversies and the ripping on each other and things like that. But I think the most fun one to watch would be the Chicago Blackhawks, with all those young kids back in the day, Patrick Kane and Taves and Keith and all the drama that sometimes did go on there, or before they even started winning it all, the limo ride in Vancouver and things like that. I think there'd be a lot of good color with the Chicago Blackhawks. But if you just wanted good entertainment, I think in the NHL, a really cool documentary would be Sydney versus Alex and the rivalry that they have, yet the mutual respect that they have. Those Islanders teams back in the early 80s, the stories there are just absolutely scintillating. So I think a lot of that type of stuff. I don't think that you'd get anything, a quote, last dance. That would have a lot of the drama that, say, the Bulls had. I love the documentary, by the way. I thought it was. I was a huge Bulls fan growing up, a huge Michael Jordan fan growing up. When I moved to Florida, and I think it's still the case, WGN was national, so I was able to. Honestly, I remember we'd be playing flag football in my park in my neighborhood, and I would run home right at 7:30 Eastern time to watch the Bulls starting lineups, because I just love red clay and the music and just watching these guys come out for the starting lineups. And I bet you I watched every Bulls game, especially every Bulls home game. Growing up, I absolutely loved it, and it is an interesting documentary because you definitely, I think it's impossible. I think you come away from the documentary still respecting Michael Jordan and the success that he has, and what made him tick. But man, I think you do lose a little respect for him on just the way that he operated and all the stuff behind the scenes. It's interesting that he let us into the world like that, and really a lot of the stuff that maybe at least some of us diehards as a kid didn't know, how much he was not beloved a lot of times by his teammates.
Right. He's a manipulative jerk. But I think too, sometimes we all love the big winner story, but so many winners in sports or in society to succeed to the level that, Steve Jobs or Michael Jordan does, or Zuckerberg does. I mean, what part of yourself do you have to kind of put aside to be that obsessive and to be able to step on that many necks to get where you want to go? I mean, it's just not always a pretty story when somebody makes it big.
Yeah, no doubt. It's kind of like how you got to the start of the strip, top of the strip.
Oh, I stepped on so many necks.
I know. I blew the punchline. It would have been so much easier if I said that cleaner. I
will say this, Michael, but let me interrupt. I would say that the two I would like, as I'm not a hockey diehard the way you are, the two last dance possibilities I would watch, either the Islanders dynasty. What was it like for those guys to be celebrities in New York? And what was the nightlife like? How crazy did it get? And the other one would be the height of the Edmonton Oilers dynasty, when you had Messier and Gretzky becoming this huge, continental celebrity.
Yeah. And, frankly, I mean, if you think about the Islanders won 4 straight cups, but they did in that 4 straight cup dynasty, their last dance was losing to the Oilers and starting their dynasty.
Right.
And and so, that could probably be, I just don't know if the footage is around. I mean, that's to me the most fascinating thing about this thing is that for 22 years, this footage has just been sitting locked in a vault. And finally we got to see all this stuff. And I did love how they went back and forth to really, sort of bring his early years in the NBA and kind of mesh it with their last year. And, I remember as a kid not liking Jerry Krause and, because all that stuff was out there and the fact that he was tearing this team down. And when you look back at the documentary, even though there are times where you just, you still don't get why Jerry Krause was such an absolute jerk when it came to, like, I don't care what happens, Phil Jackson is leaving. The reality is he was a brilliant general manager. I mean, he put those teams together. And the other thing about him is that he was picked on, man. Like, it's disgusting the way that he was treated by guys like Michael Jordan and people like that. I mean, but the other thing that was, there were so many parts of it that were entertaining, but the one that was I just rolled my eyes of that is just so absolutely inconceivable is the food poisoning scene.
Krasinski and I just did a whole episode on that. And I just started the show by saying this didn't happen. There's no way this could possibly happen, that the most popular athlete in the world with hotel security, team security, and personal security there would order a pizza for Michael Jordan to be delivered to his hotel room, and 5 guys would get to the hotel room and hand him a poisoned pizza. It didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, it just made no sense. I wish I wasn't watching alone because I got up from my chair and was like pacing because I wanted to just say that this doesn't happen. Like, there's no way. You just don't, especially when you're ordering to a hotel room too. Here, let me tell you about the 15 reasons why this could not have happened. Okay. One, when you order to a hotel room, there's no way that they're saying, hey, this is Michael Jordan's hotel room 1020. Okay. No. The second thing that's not going to happen is that if you're the night before an elimination game in the freaking NBA final, do you think that the Chicago Bulls would allow anybody up to that room? You would be stopped at the bottom and you'd have to drop off your pizza at the bottom. You're not getting up to go bring it to Michael Jordan. And the other thing is all these guys have aliases when they stay at hotels. I mean, even in hockey, some of these guys have aliases. I once called Pavel Bure during the can't remember which All-Star game was the one that was in Toronto, but he was the one where his brother, and Victor Kozlov was on the same line. And for some reason, I couldn't get him on the phone before the Stanley Cup final. I think it was the All-Star game. It was either the All-Star game or the World Cup, but I had to call him in his hotel room in Toronto it had to be that because I don't think I covered that All-Star game in Toronto. So I think I had to call him to do my feature. And his alias for that stay, because he just knew that I was the only one that needed him, was Michael Russo. So I called the hotel. I'm like, can I have Michael Russo's room, please? And that's how I was connected to Pavel Bure. Okay. But all these guys have aliases. But the other thing is, like, are you telling me that 5 guys poisoned a pizza that was going to Michael Jordan? Like, how do you even know how to give somebody just food poisoning? What if they killed the guy?
I know.
Like what? They
it's
just
ridiculous.
went, hey, Michael Jordan's calling. We want the Utah Jazz to win. Go get that rat poison that we keep in the back and let's pour it on his pizza. I mean,
it's all ridiculous.
It's so insane. And then the fact that his two, the strength coach and his assistant are like going with this absolute lie is just hysterical to me. Like, anyway. It was just unbelievable.
Hey, thanks to Tony Hoagland, your State Farm agent, works out of Champlin, handles my insurance and Michael Russo's insurance.
State Farm announces the Good Neighbor Relief Program. Our auto customers will receive, on average, a 25% credit for their premium until May 31st. No policyholder action is needed. That's $2 billion in customer savings. Because now more than ever, being a good neighbor means everything. Call State Farm agent Tony Hoagland at 763-421-4900 or online at champlininsurance.com.
I'm not doubting that he was sick, by the way.
Of course he was sick.
I don't buy all the stories that he was acting for the cameras, but I don't buy that he was given food poisoning by the pizza. And hey, you know what? Maybe he got food poisoning from the pizza. I'll give him that if it's true the other two didn't eat it. But I don't buy that 5 Utah Jazz pizza parlor guys tried to freaking poison Michael Jordan.
No, or we're allowed on his floor, much less to be able to walk 5 people up to his front door. It's just, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely
it's just insane.
Michael, I wrote a piece in the Friday Star Tribune, just kind of looking back at basically somebody reminded me of an old time story that I had completely forgotten about. And I just kind of went back through my memory, and wrote about just some odd occurrences I had back when, media access was just much more wide open. And as you and I, and this has been a theme for this show for a long time, because in hockey, you still kind of have that access in a lot of cases. And when you work a beat the way you work a beat, you get more access. But I was just reminded of all the Twins and Vikings teams, even Timberwolves teams I covered in the 90s, where you basically walk in the locker room, you talk to anybody at any time. The downside was they might threaten to beat you up, but the upside was you actually had real one-on-one conversations with people all the time. And that still kind of exists to some extent in hockey.
Yeah, who knows if it will after this. I cannot imagine that it's going to be anytime soon that any of us are going to ever be allowed into a locker room. I think everything, once we're allowed to cover games again, are going to be press conferences with social distance and things like that. And I don't think that any of us will complain about that, where, 2 months ago, none of us envisioned this. And I was, pitching and whining about this type of stuff. So, but to your original point, yes, that's probably why I'm able to build really quality relationships with a lot of the players that I cover. Now, not everyone loves me by any stretch of the imagination, but I do have really good rapport with most guys that I cover, and it's because of the access that you get, and that's the great thing about covering the Minnesota Wild, and that's the great thing of having Aaron Sickman as a PR guy, and and Megan Kogut, and it's a great thing that I think that Craig Leopold and Matt Maka really endorse in their organization, is that these guys are extremely accessible. So when Eric Stahl signs with the Minnesota Wild, I take him out to lunch to get to know him, but also to do a feature. That was one of my favorite features I wrote at my end of my script career. Was sitting down with Eric Stahl at Herbie's in St. Paul, and just really getting to know a guy that I'd covered for so long, but not personally. It's why I'm able to get into Zach Parisi's house and do that story entering his 1,000th game, and go to the rink in Edina with Ryan Suter and his son Brooks years ago when he was going to the All-Star game, or sit down with Devin Dubnik's family, or go to the Lake Elmo Inn with Alex Stalock. And this stuff is allowed by the Minnesota Wild, where you just can't do that really covering not only any other league, but any other sport. Like Aaron Sickman has had Zoom calls for us almost every single week since the pandemic has begun. The Chicago Blackhawks have not allowed their writers to talk to one player. The Chicago Blackhawks, yelled at a writer for calling the mascot up directly. There's certain teams that aren't like the Minnesota Wild. So the reality is that we are very lucky covering this sport. We're very lucky covering this team. Now, there are certain things that have changed in this world. As you mentioned, back when I covered the Florida Panthers, it was a lot less media. So, after a game, there'd be 15 guys in a locker room, and I knew that if I was going to Roberto Luongo, that I was getting him alone, or if I went up to Robert Svala, I got him alone, and then when Luongo was done talking, I went over to Luongo. So you got guys alone. Where look at Jim Souhan tweeting while I'm in this rant. That's unbelievable. But anyway,
you're still talking?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm looking at Twitter right now, and I just see Jim Souhan tweeting.
I have to do something. You're filibustering. You're filibustering the entire show.
My only point here is that, and it's the new world that we're in because there's so much media, is that like now you usually can't, it's a big scrum. So if I'm getting Jared Spurgeon after a game, 10 other people around us getting Spurgeon. Yep. If I'm getting Zach Parise after a game, it's 10 other people. So that's the only difference about today's day and age.
Yes, and that's kind of one of the many points I was making, is that you just can't do it the way you used to. It's not the same, because when I was on the Twins beat and when I was on the Vikings beat on non-game days, I prided myself on talking as often as I could one-on-one to the people I covered. And now everything has to be done in groups.
Yep, no doubt about it. Let's talk about what you just tweeted. Really sad, actually, but inevitable that the State Fair was going to be canceled.
State Fair was canceled. Listen, I'm not a big State Fair person. I just made fun of myself for that. But I don't like to see it canceled. I don't like to see anything canceled. I wish we were at full strength and had full schedule of everything. And I acknowledge, even though the fair is not my favorite event, I acknowledge how big a deal that is in this state and how big a symbol it is to our populace as well.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And like I said, this was inevitable. I mean, just the way that things are going, there is zero chance or ability to social distance at the state fair. I mean, there are some days I walk into that state fair and I only go, same thing. I don't go for, although I have fun there. I don't go for fun. I go to do events at the Fan, or back when the Star Tribune, I would do things at the Star Tribune, but I usually do 3 or 4 things at the Fan booth, and I go there for that. But there are some days at the state fair, like I'll stop, take a picture, like looking down at the streets, and it is bumper to bumper, thousands of people. How can you social distance at the Sweet Martha's line, right? There's no way. So this was just, it's a shame because people love this thing. It is fun. It's really neat to be there. I mean, I don't do the rides and things like that, but I like walking around with my friends after the Fan. I've done some really cool stories at the Fan. Mike Yo's last year, I remember after I interviewed Mike Yo at the Star Tribune booth, I walked around the fair with Mike Yo and wound up doing a real cool Q&A with him. I've done the same thing with Bruce Boudreau there. I've done it with just friends of mine there. There are 2 kids that I know, Jimmy Connor and Johnny Connor and Eli Goldstein, that they've always made it a point to like make me have them get me something at the state fair, because I always brag that I really haven't eaten anything at the state fair. So that type of stuff. It's one of those. It's a fun thing, but it was inevitable that this thing was going to be canceled.
Thanks to Grey Duck Vodka, Minnesota's vodka.
Minnesota has always been home for me and my family, and truly, I am so proud of everything about this state. This is Carly Zucker. I love celebrating everything unique about our state, and that includes the best vodka, and that's Grey Duck Vodka. When you head to the store, remember Grey Duck Vodka is locally made, locally owned, gluten-free, and most importantly, a company that gives back to the community. Thank you for choosing Grey Duck Vodka and supporting local business.
All right, anything else you want to get to, or should we hit Twitter questions?
Yeah, let's hit Twitter questions.
From Colin Jacobson, with this new 2014 playoff format in the potential 2 hub cities, what would days look like? Will games be back-to-back throughout the day? Just curious what the structure could be.
Yeah, great question by Colin, who has used to come to our podcast at Delano's.
I miss doing those.
Yes. It's a great question, because if there's 12 teams in one city, which is the way that they seem to be talking now, it's going to be back-to-back games. Everybody's talking like Vegas is the front runner, but I just don't know how you could play 5-6 games a day potentially in 120-degree temperatures come July. I mean, that seems crazy. And the other thing is, where is there enough ice in Vegas to house that many teams, to have practices and games and things like that? I mean, you can't have teams practicing at 2 a.m. And also in the middle of a quote playoffs, you don't want to take teams out of routine. So you don't want to make it like where there's only the Vegas Golden Knights practice facility and one team has to practice at 8, and the next team at 10, and the next team at noon, and the next team at 2, and the next team at 4. I mean, that's not fair either. So I just don't know how Vegas, it wouldn't shock me if, like, say, the Stanley Cup final and the conference finals wind up in Vegas. But I think it's going to be, it makes more sense to put them in markets like Minnesota or Edmonton, where there's a lot of ice sheets. And Edmonton is really making a political push right now to try to convince the NHL that they be a hub city. Same thing with Vancouver. Vancouver's been all over this. Minnesota's been all over it. Columbus has been all over it. Toronto's been all over it. And Vegas. These are the teams that I think would be considered the front runners right now. And I would say that, most likely what we're going to find here is that once the NHL players essentially, if they approve the format of 24 teams, what they're going to do in the NHL is announce the phase 2, where these guys are now given a date to get back into the city, into their markets, and start quarantining. But then what they'll do is eventually announce the absolute rules and regulations when it comes to a 2014 format. And then eventually last second we'll find out the actual hub cities. And one reason why they're waiting there is that they want to make sure that a lot of the things that I talked about with the bubble and testing and things like that is ironed down specifically. But the other thing is they want to make sure that come late July that they don't commit in June to having Minnesota as a hotspot or Minnesota as a hub city, and then all of a sudden it becomes a hotspot. So they're going to wait as long as possible.
Thanks to Twill and the Edina Galleria, longtime sponsor. They are kind of waiting for clarification on exactly what they can do. I would just, instead of relying on this, our network to tell you what's going on with Twill, I would just recommend, if you're looking for great men's clothing, go to twillmn.com or call. You can also email Scott Dayton, scott@twillmn.com, or Nicole at twillmn.com. And, you can still buy gift certificates. They will deliver things curbside. They are still in business. They have contactless pickup for you at the Edina Galleria. It's still a great place to shop, still a great way to shop, still a gregreat store. And again, this is one of those local businesses that we really value, that has been supportive of our local business. You can also call them at 952-922-2711. So if you want men's clothing, and you can work with Twill, they will get it to you. Just reach out to them, and as always, you'll just receive great personal service. From Aaron Berger, old friend, if they resume and multiple teams play at the same arena throughout the day, will games be tape delayed? Have we gotten that far?
No, I don't. I've not heard that type of stuff yet.
From MGDLN, any chance Menel or Annis will appear in Minnesota Wild jerseys next year?
Maybe Manel.
I know. As I was reading, I know I was screwing it up.
Yeah, maybe Manel. But again, if Patterson's on the team, they have 3 right shot Ds. Obviously, it depends if somebody like Dumba was traded this offseason. But there's going to have to be room for him to be on the team. Right now, I think that next season they're going to be expanded rosters. And so if that's the case, Manel could be on an expanded roster potentially. But again, a young prospect like that, I don't think it'd be good to make him a full-time practice player. I would think that you're going to want to have him playing all the time. So if the AHL's on time and he'd be a practice player in Minnesota, maybe you don't have him there. As far as Annis, he's an unrestricted free agent. It would depend if he's re-signed. Now, this summer, if you're talking about, there will be black aces and expanded roster, most likely, in case guys get sick or hurt. And obviously, Manel and Annis would absolutely have a shot to be on that. It's going to be interesting with some of these unrestricted free agents like Sam Annis that could be on black aces. Because let's just say the Wild went to the Stanley Cup Finals, and the Stanley Cup Finals were in September. I know people are just laughing when I said that, but let's just presume.
Sure.
Okay. Well, he's an unrestricted free agent. What if, let's just say that Sam Annis has some crazy offer to go play in Europe next year. I'm just making this up. I mean, Sam Annis wants to be an NHLer. So his first goal is to sign in the NHL. But let's just say some team in the KHL or Germany Sweden offered him a boatload of money. Well, their seasons potentially could start in September. And now all of a sudden he's going to kind of be stuck in a black ace situation in Minnesota. So that's the other type of stuff that I don't think they've figured out completely yet, is how does this affect two-way type players that are going to get European offers that could potentially be on NHL rosters come August and September. There could be essentially black aces that say, hey, I know you have me here, but I've got to go. So that'll be interesting as well.
Zach Spicer, interesting philosophical question. Of a team, like let's say the Minnesota Wild players banded together and said, we're not going to play. Would they just pull them right out of, let's say a 24-team tournament? Would they, any idea what would happen if a team just didn't, if a group of players just didn't want to play?
That stuff, it won't happen. I mean, obviously, no players are going to do that. But I can tell you that I'm sure there's a lot of teams that have a lot of players that are not going to be happy with this.
From Von Trashinsky, does a player like Annis, through their agent, ever ask for just a one-game call-up at some point in the next contract as a key unofficial condition to re-sign? I don't think they can do that.
No. And Sam Annis has made clear to me, even publicly on a podcast that I did with him, about a month ago that he's not that type of person that has ever really had his agent call the Wild and complain. Now, there have been other minor leaguers in the past that have asked to be traded or things like that. So, but Sam's not one of them.
From Jens, what are the league's latest plans for the draft?
Sorry, say that again.
What are the latest plans for the draft, or are there?
That's going to come out with probably when the NHL announces their return to play format. It's going to be coupled with a lot of the other things on the offseason calendar. The one thing I can tell you is the draft will not be in early June at this point. The question is it in late June before the resumption of the season, or do they just go back to having it during a truncated offseason in advance of free agency? I think that's what the majority of GMs want. The other added wrinkle here that I think might cause this to happen after the playoffs is the fact that now that the top 4 teams are being reseeded, while they play them, potentially reseeded if they play themselves in the top 4 in each conference are going to play each other to potentially affect seeding, but the bottom 8 are going to play in this play-in. Well, what if a team like Minnesota upsets the Vancouver Canucks, or a team like the Montreal Canadiens or the Chicago Blackhawks have upsets in the first round? Does that now mean the Pittsburgh Penguins get a lottery pick? If the Montreal Canadiens play the Pittsburgh Penguins and beat them in the play-in, does that mean now suddenly the Penguins should get a lottery pick because they didn't make the quote 16-team playoff? And if that's the case, then the Wild don't get their pick. It'll go until the following year. So now suddenly this new playoff format really has a major effect on how people are going to be determining the top playoff seedings.
From Kyle Muchez.
Draft seedings.
Right. From Kyle Muchez, after viewing the 2014 format, do you agree with Montreal and Chicago in the mix?
I mean, I don't think it's fair, especially because they were sellers and each had like 1% chances of making the playoffs. But I also get why the league is doing it. They want as many teams as possible to create interest again. And when you have the original 6 teams like the Rangers and the Montreal Canadiens and the Chicago Blackhawks getting into the playoffs now, it adds a ton of extra eyes on the sport. So I don't agree with it, but I get why it's happening. And again, in this non-perfect world that we're in right now, I think all of us are going to have to just accept that there are things about the format that they're not going to like.
From Eric Wong, is re-signing Soucy a top priority this offseason, assuming he becomes a free agent?
Yes, Bill Guerin has told me that 4 or 5 times.
All right, and we have a bunch of questions
about the thing with Soucy, again, to understand is that he missed the threshold to becoming a Group 2 free agent based on the fact that he hasn't played X amount of games, and and he's over 25 years old. So basically, now it puts him in a rare position to become a Group 6 unrestricted free agent, and so it just ups his market. But the Wild have made it extremely clear to me that they plan on working hard to re-sign him, even if that means giving him a little more money than they had originally penciled in for him.
All right, let's wrap up the show by handling all of the Kaprizov questions in one fell swoop.
God, I thought we were going to go through an entire show without mentioning him.
Can't do it. I tried to make it the last topic, but it is the last topic. What's going on?
Yeah, nothing's changed from the last podcast and all the articles I've written. The one thing is that I can say that he's hired an agent and that his goal is to play with the Minnesota Wild. The issue that he's in is that he wants to play this upcoming season because he doesn't want to sit around till December and January and not play. And so this is the issue. As I reported in The Athletic and on last week's podcast, the NHL has told me through impeccable sources that there's almost zero chances that they're going to allow these type of players to play in the NHL if the season resumes this summer. And so if that's the case now, if Kaprizov is willing to sign a contract for the 2021 season, it means that he's going to have to figure out a place that he could either play or come over here and practice full time. And no player just wants to be a full time practice player. So what the Wild are going to consider, with the help of the person that represents him, is do you loan him back to Moscow with a clause that would allow him, once training camp starts in the NHL, to come over here? But that gets dicey because there's no transfer agreement between the KHL and the NHL as opposed to other European leagues. So really, even though it would be really frowned upon them if all of a sudden Moscow essentially for lack of a better term, held him hostage, you are now trusting the fact that he is going to come back here and be allowed to get out of the country as well. Remember, he's playing for the Red Army team. This is not this is not the United States. This is not the NHL. Sometimes it gets a little dicey over there, and the Wild would be crossing their fingers when it comes to it. So it's a big time concern that they have right now, and so they're going to have to decide that. So right now they're continuing to wait to see what the transition rules will be if the NHL returns this summer. When it's official that he is not allowed to play, then they're going to then Kaprizov's going to have to decide. All right, am I going to re-sign in KHL for a year? Am I going to sign with the Minnesota Wild for the 2021 season? And if that's the case, would the Wild loan him somewhere to play?
All right. Good answer. Good stuff from Michael. I appreciate all the Twitter questions. Of course, we never get to all of them, but we do appreciate them, and they do spur some good conversations. Thanks to our producer, Brandon Morton. And keep checking out TalkNorth.com. Again, the best way to listen to the network or the show is by subscribing to your favorite podcast app. Check out Meatgistics, a new meat and grilling show. Includes talk about beer that goes well with grilling, everything else. And we also have gopher content from Gopher Hole and Nadine Babu's operation. So just, again, check out TalkNorth.com, and we do appreciate everyone who listens.
Pretty little city built on a hillside. Music in the bars and fire in the sky. We went to the beach and it was covered in ice. And I used to call it home. So much coming out, there's nothing going in.